So this video will be fairly short. It's going to be on sort of the anatomy of a Viking men's kirtle, sort of a basic one. A few people have asked me some questions based on the video I did reviewing the woolen Viking tunic. So I figured I might as well just make a video, get it out there, and that way if anybody asks me any more questions I can just point them to the video. Also, I apologize for all the background noise, if you guys can hear that. For some reason, everybody in this neighborhood has decided to be crazy noisy today. Listening to music loud, mowing their lawns, construction, everything. Just, it's insane. So, to get started, this is sort of just my under kirtle. I made it based on the skilled hem tunic, so it's not exactly the average one. It sort of started out as the average one, and then I modified it to make it more like the skilled hem. Without doing the embroidery and without things being as accurate to the original dimensions as the original, because it was sort of an afterthought that I wanted to do it. So this it has a collar and a neck flap, which aren't on the normal ones. But the base of that is sort of just your normal keyhole neckline. And so to start off, when you're looking for a kirtle, you want the neckline to not be too open. If it's too open, it won't work, because in Norse society, showing your chest as a man was sort of seen as being womanly and therefore not sort of within social customs. So the necklines were actually fairly tight up, especially on under kirtles, and there is some speculation as to what kind of fasteners they would have, whether it be something like this where there's a bead and a little loop, because beads have been found in graves near the necks on men, but brooches have not, so there's no real thing there. So that one's sort of whether there was a closure there or not, or what it was, is kind of up in the air. And so in the other video, I talked about side gores and underarm gussets. Well, the gusset is basically just this square, or roughly square, of fabric that's sewn in under the arm, because the way that the kirtles are, they're essentially just a large rectangle for the body. And so if you didn't have this extra piece of fabric here that's sewn in, you would only be able to do this comfortably. There wouldn't be enough fabric for you to raise above that stretches out, and there wouldn't be enough there wouldn't be enough underneath that when you drop your arms down, it sort of falls away from your armpit, so you don't have that seam right up in here. Because modern shirts, they're cut so that the armholes actually do this, so you have more space in the chest than at the shoulder. So that's just sort of to create that. That windlass tunic, it didn't have that. It just sort of had that sort of incorporated into the shape of the thing. And they just cut that section on a curve. But the original Viking Age ones would have had this, because they wouldn't have been able to weave a section like that. And it would be too much of a waste for them to cut a curve on either the top of the main body or the sleeve. So they would sew in this, which is essentially a scrap. Now the side gores. The side gores are basically just these big triangular pieces that are sewn in on here. Mine, I like them starting a little bit higher up, so that way I have a little more room in the stomach area. Not that I necessarily need it so much these days, but it just helps, and it makes it look more like an even taper instead of looking like you've got a shirt on with a skirt part attached. It just gives it a slightly better look. But they're just a big triangle that's sewn in, and the reason for that is that when the kirtle goes down to your knees, it makes the bottom hem of it wider, so that you can actually walk. And then it doesn't have the splits, doesn't have split sides. because that would just allow air and stuff to get in, wind, cold air and stuff to get in. So that's this, and that's why, and then part of the reason why they have them that go down is so that when it rains or snows or whatever, it all just falls away instead of, getting caught in your belt line or whatever. And from what I understand, your Kyrtle should be, between probably 5 inches up from your knee to your knee length. Anything shorter than that is a little too short, and anything longer than that is probably going to make it hard for you to walk. So, or at least on the battlefield. And especially if it gets to be the point where you get down, you get killed on the battlefield, and you go to stand up, and you accidentally step on your hem. It wouldn't be the greatest thing in the world. So, as far as things go for like ornamentation on the edges and hems and stuff, this one is just basically hemmed all over. There's no real fancy stitching or anything on it. That's sort of undertunics. Undertunics just fairly plain. I know the original skilled hem tunic actually had embroidery all along the collar and the flap. Well, it was either embroidery or it was woven in bands of color. But beyond that, there really shouldn't be too much embellishment on the under kirtle. On the over kirtles, tablet woven trim on the neck and cuffs is fairly acceptable. There is sort of an argument as to whether it being on the bottom hem as well is legitimate or not. I've seen valid arguments for both, but I think the commonly accepted belief is that it wasn't. So I would keep that in mind. Any embroidery done on the over kirtle is probably, it should be minimal. It should be in the right style, and it should also, I believe it's commonly accepted that if there is embroidery on it, the only way, at least in my society, that it's acceptable is that if the embroidery is on a separate piece of fabric that's sewn onto the garment like a patch. I believe that's correct. I'd probably have to check that out, but that seems to be what's popping up in my mind at the moment. So I would say, for the most part, keeping it simple is better, especially if you're a beginner. And yeah, beyond that, it's just a matter of finding somebody who will make it for you in the right colors and right materials. I have yet to find a commercially available one that's fully acceptable. I sort of, if I find one, then I'll endorse that product if it's good. And yeah, it's just finding somewhere that will sell them and make them in the right colors and everything, or making one yourself. So that's about it on these. It's fairly, the basics are fairly simple. That it's just sort of a keyhole neckline, fairly close fitted sleeves. Mine have the split cuffs. That's partially because I always have trouble getting my hands through sleeves and stuff, and I made them with the intention of, if I ever wanted to wear arm guards for combat, I could wear them underneath this, as per the new rules for my society. So I kept in mind that, so I did this. Some people have the fully closed hems on their or cuffs on their shirts and their kirtles. So yeah, it's, yep. You want it to be fairly close fitting. You don't want it too tight that you can't move, but not too tight too tight that you can't move, but too loose that it gets in the way of things. Yeah. So the basic kirtle, fairly simple. It is definitely probably easier to find somebody to make one to get it right than to look for a large company that makes them. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this helps people, and see you next time.